Let's go to Washington and speak to Giorgio Cafiero, the CEO of Gulf State Analytics, also adjunct professor at Georgetown University. It's past midnight for you, Giorgio. Thank you so much for staying awake for us. Isn't it almost obvious that every time Israel modifies the previously agreed ceasefire deal, that it knows it's making proposals Hamas will find unacceptable?
Yeah, thanks for having me on your network. I think that's a very good point you're making. Hamas is going to be rejecting this current Israeli proposal, and the Israelis know that Hamas basically self-destructing and disarming crosses a red line, and that this is sort of a non-starter. I think also many Palestinians in Gaza probably doubt that even if Hamas would disarm, that would constitute the end of the genocide or the end of Israel's presence on the ground in the besieged enclave. I think that, in light of what happened with the ceasefire that went into effect in January, that Israel collapsed last month, it's very clear that Israel does not stick to the terms of any of these agreements. And therefore, I think Hamas is of the view that there is really nothing to gain from sort of going along with what really amounts to extortion or an attempt at extortion on Israel's part.
But surely the Americans are just as responsible for this impasse, because every time the Israelis speak, they say we are going in lockstep with Washington. And we know that Donald Trump's idea is to empty Gaza completely of all Palestinians, which the Israeli government and its ministers are now openly talking about, rather than just being something that's reported. So this is clearly a Washington-Tel Aviv axis.
100%. The United States is certainly not some sort of a neutral party here. This is an American and Israeli war on Gaza, not just an Israeli war on Gaza. We all know that if the Trump administration wanted Israel to agree to that ceasefire that was implemented back in January, it would have been extremely easy for the White House to make it clear to Israel that it has no choice but to continue abiding by the ceasefire. It was a decision on the part of the Trump administration to release the pressure on Israel, and that explains why the ceasefire collapsed. Everything that Israel is doing in Gaza is made possible because of the Trump administration, and before January, because of the Biden administration. You're absolutely right to bring up this point that we can't ignore the role of Washington here as the genocide in Gaza continues.
Giorgio, what do you make of the international community's inability to even get humanitarian aid into Gaza? It's since March the 2nd that Israel's imposed this latest blockade. And bizarrely enough, in the 19th month of this war, that's the longest period of any blockade since the start of the fighting.
Well, it speaks to larger issues, problems with the United Nations and the organization's lack of effectiveness and the lack of will in the international community. It speaks to the fact that, the United States is the most powerful country in the world, and countries that stand up to the United States have to pay a huge price for it. And this is what we have seen since this genocide in Gaza began back in October 2023. The world has basically permitted this to happen. And unfortunately, I don't think that that's going to fundamentally change. There's a lot of talk about a so-called multipolar world, but what we've seen, I think, since October 2023 are really some serious limits to what multipolarity can do for the Palestinians and for other people. At the end of the day, Israel gets to get away with this because the United States enables Israel to do so, and other countries in the world haven't been able to stop Israel.
Giorgio, thanks very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.